G'day and welcome to the most requested car that we've ever had here on ReDriven. Finally, it's the Honda S2000. Now look, it goes without saying that the S2000 is an iconic performance car, but because it is a performance car and it's nearly 20 years old, in some cases it's over 20 years old, many of these have lived an extremely hard life. So are they still any good, or are we all just still wrapped up in the hype? Okay, so unless you've been living under a rock, the S2000 is basically Honda's small rear-wheel drive convertible. It's basically like their version of the Mazda MX-5, just far angrier. And to many, the S2000, it sort of represents almost like an exclamation point to the golden era of Honda.
When these arrived back in 1999, Honda had been on a winning streak of performance cars with the likes of the Prelude, Integra, CRX, and obviously the NSX. But with the S2000, they attempted to blend retro convertible sensibilities with, for the time, high-tech engineering and lessons learnt from that incredible back catalogue. The rest of the recipe was near textbook perfect sports car. Small size, lightweight, a 50-50 weight balance, superb transmission feel, and suspension engineering shared with the sublime NSX. However, this is a performance car, and many that drive them can run out of talent rather quickly, so checking for accident damage and abuse is absolutely critical.
Actually, there are a bunch of things that you do need to check out with the S2000, actually with any used car before you buy one. Hence why we've made the ultimate used car buyer's guide. The video link is just up there and also down there in the description. So look, when we were researching this video, we found that the majority of YouTube videos about the S2000 have these things, hammering around some racetrack or being on some amazing winding mountainous road. And of course, at the limit, in those conditions, they are sublime things. So because of that, we're going to do this video a bit differently. Actually, before we get to that, I need to explain something. This is the engine, and this is the front wheel axle line. Notice how the engine is behind the front wheels? That means technically this car is a front mid-engined car, just like all the best front-engined Ferraris and Aston Martins. And because of this, the handling of this car is just sublime. Like, obviously at the limit, it absolutely, it comes alive, but even around here, like in the suburbs at normal speeds, it just feels fantastic all the time. And look, I'll be honest, unless you're buying an S2000 to be a track car, or it's your second or third car to take out purely on a Sunday for a blast around some mountain, these are the conditions that this car is going to be spending 90% of its time. And the good news is, even after 20 years and this many kilometers, this thing is still, it's still engaging, it's still tactile, and it's just fun and involving all the time. But you know what, like, even though it's super engaging, it's not some harsh and unbearable environment that you need to be, almost a masochist to enjoy. It feels quality in here, like everything feels just so right. What I mean by quality is that all of the control surfaces, they feel cohesive. It feels like a team, like the weight of the steering, even like the spring ratio of all of the pedals, the clutch, the brake, accelerator, they all work in harmony together. And then of course, you have this guy, this shifter. Look, what hasn't been said about the quality of the shifting in an S2000? We all know how good it is. And yes, it is perfection. Look, honestly, I've had entire relationships that are less satisfying than using this gear change. But it's not even just the shift feel, it's the actual gear ratios. The ratios feel so short that they encourage you to play with it all the time. I mean, the shifter, nothing else. Also, because it's so small and so agile and it's topless, it feels like you're going so much faster than you actually are. I keep looking down thinking, okay, how over the speed limit am I now? And I haven't even got to the speed limit. And that's what a performance car, for me anyway, should be all about. It should be about the feeling of engagement and just enjoying driving, and my God, this does it so well. But when you do get the opportunity to rev it out, still going, still going. That's amazing. That feels and sounds so good. 9,000 RPM redline. Oh, one more time, yeah? Wow. Okay, you know what I love most about that? It's like, obviously it sounds amazing and revs out really hard. That's all fantastic. But I love that you've got to work for the performance. Like, it is a quick car, but it's not crazy fast. It doesn't throw you at the horizon like some sort of psychopath. Like, you have to work for the performance. And when you do work for the performance, it just gives back in spades. But there is a negative. Because it has a 9,000 RPM redline, there is a bit of a copious lack of torque and power lower in the rev range. See, in the real world, like here, having to rev the pants off something to, pull into traffic or, exit onto a freeway is not the most socially acceptable way of driving. So look, overall, what's it like to drive? I've been really fortunate enough to drive a stack of cars, and there are very few other cars I've ever driven that have encouraged me to want to drive just for the sheer pleasure of driving over and over and over again like this thing. And I'm not just talking drive it more and more and more at stupid speeds on some amazing mountainous road, but just driving around town at normal speeds. That's how enjoyable this is. So when we were researching this video, we found a whole bunch of journalists that were saying that this interior feels too cramped and trying too hard to feel modern, so therefore it's too minimal. But you know what? They're wrong. This is awesome. What I love most about this interior is that it feels like it wraps around you. It's almost like, rather than sitting in a car, it feels like you're putting on an outfit, like you're putting on a racing suit. And for what this car is all about, that's exactly what it should do. Like the driving position, phenomenal. Like it's just, you're hunkered down, everything is up quite high, the shoulder line's quite high. So again, you just feel like you're part of the vehicle. Like even design-wise, like yes, it is minimal, but it should be minimal because this car is all about driving. It's the driving experience. It's not about, what gizmos and gadgets you've got to play with. Now, as far as wear and tear goes, look, this car is from 1999. It has, over 120,000 Ks on it. And the wear and tear is, as you'd expect, there is a bit of, some texture and paint peeling sort of here, but the leather still feels quite soft and nice and it hasn't gone overly glossy. The steering wheel's kind of getting a little bit glossy up here, but that can probably be rejuvenated. But besides that, like, it feels great. Armrest is great. The carpeting here feels fantastic. The dashboard looks great. All the textures and colors here are excellent. Door cards feel good. Yeah, it's like over 20 years old, nearly 120,000 Ks. Excellent. In saying that, but we have seen some abused S2000s and S2000s that tend to have the roof off all the time and are exposed to sun and the conditions, and the interiors can wear. Now, as far as practicality here in the cabin goes, you've got a net down here, which is basically kind of like a glove box. You've got a single cup holder here. You've got a little storage cubby hole here. And you've got a hook behind the passenger seat, which is where you want to hang your suit if you want to crush your suit to pieces. And in the cabin, that's about it for practicality, but it's a Roadster, it's not meant to be practical. And practicality in the boot actually is pretty bloody good compared to the other topless cars that we reviewed, like the Mazda MX-5 and the Lotus Exige. This is excellent. Well, in standard form, the tech is pretty shit, but it should be shit because this car isn't about, trying to see why Grindr or Tinder isn't loading on Apple CarPlay. It's about the driving experience. So yeah, it's good that the tech's a bit shit.
However, the tech and features that you can expect include an average-sounding 2-speaker stereo, 6-stack CD player, climate control, leather seats, remote central locking, power windows and mirrors.
But the AP2 update added
2 additional speakers, a 10-disc CD stacker, as well as a glass rear window with a defroster.
Now look, obviously you can add Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with an aftermarket head unit. You can also add a better stereo with, a bigger subwoofer in the boot, but if you're the sort of person that drives down, your local cafe district with your stereo blasting and the subs booming with the roof down, you don't look cool, you look like a wanker, and you're ruining the image of this car for everyone, so stop being a dickhead. Now, in terms of safety, remember we're talking 20-year-old levels of safety, tech and equipment here, and it's a small rear-wheel drive car without a roof, so if you're buying an S2000, safety probably isn't all that high on your priority list. But look, to give you an overview of what safety tech and equipment that you can expect in the S2000, I'm going to do another voiceover explaining it, but this time I'm going to do it in the same way that these cars can find themselves going, which is backwards and very quickly. Now, for the full breakdown of what tech, features and safety equipment these have, just jump on ReDriven.com and check out that cheat sheet. Well, here in Australia, we received the S2000 in the single trim variant, but there were 2 different upgrades or 2 different generations. This, the original AP1 from 1999 to 2003, then the AP2 from 2004 to 2009.
The AP2, while visually almost identical short of the slightly larger wheels and very subtle facelift, received a host of revisions under the skin. From adjustments to the suspension tune to mechanical updates and additional features, it is still up for debate if these changes enhanced or degraded the S2000 experience.
But what goes wrong with these? Actually, before we get into what goes wrong with these, I've got to give a massive shout out to the Honda and S2000 owners groups, the Honda technicians and mechanics that we've spoken to, and all of the blogs and forums and surveys and reports that we read to research this video. If it wasn't for the owners groups, we couldn't do this. So owners groups, thank you so much. Okay, first up, there are some reports that S2000s built between 2005 and 2009 can have some tearing happening on the roof, mainly on the right-hand side. But the solution to this is simply replacing the cloth and the hinge mechanism on the right-hand side. Next up, it's highly recommended that you don't put an S2000 through a high-pressure car wash because it can leak and even damage the roof. Finally, with the roof, being an aging convertible, it's bound to have a few squeaks and rattles in the roof, but the easiest way to fix that is just with some lube, because that's how I fix my squeaks and rattles as well. But in all seriousness, just lube up the hinges, the pivot points, and the locking mechanisms. Finally, with the exterior, and look, this will depend a little bit on where you live, but it is becoming a bit of a common complaint. You need to check for rust and check everywhere. Actually, again, this is why a pre-purchase inspection is absolutely critical, because rust is evil. Now, problems inside, there are a few reports of excessive condensation in the interior. It can build up and drip into the passenger side footwell. This is generally due to the lower heater housing seam needing resealing. Now, the cooling hose for the air conditioning, it can block up, and in some cases it can overheat the fan. In some really rare cases it can actually blow the fuse out, but that can then melt the fan. Now look, before we get into the mechanical issues that these things can suffer from, the only way that we can keep making these videos for you guys is with your support, but the best way to support us is simply by hitting the like, subscribe and bell buttons and sharing our content as much as you can. If you do all that, we can just keep making these videos for you. Hopefully that'll be a good thing. Okay, now mechanically, what can go wrong with the Honda S2000? I'd bloody love to tell you, but I'm not qualified to because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But you know what? Jim is.
Look, my job here this week is pretty easy because when these things were made, Honda were at the top of their game in terms of reliability. If it's been well maintained and not seriously thrashed, these things are extremely reliable. Actually, even if it has been thrashed, they are still really reliable. They're not perfect though. Probably the biggest complaint is oil consumption. And the thing is, if you're looking to buy one of these, you're not going to know if it has a problem until you've driven it for a few thousand Ks. The best way to mitigate that risk is just make sure it's got a really good service history. Other common complaints are oil leaks, and that's typically for the ones that have got higher mileage. Another thing to look out for is timing chain noise. Now, it's usually because the timing chain tensioner is starting to fail, and that's something you can hear, and you can hear it more so on cold startups. Now, it's hard to believe that the early ones of these have been around for 20 years or so now. So that means you've got to check everything in the engine bay made of rubber or plastic because all of that is starting to get a bit tired now. Transmissions and drive lines, look, the higher mileage ones, and especially the ones that have been thrashed, can often have a problem with the second gear synchro. Now, you'll know that when you drive it, you'll hear it. If you shift a bit quickly from first to second, you'll feel it crunching. The differential in these is a Torsen LSD, which means there's no clutch packs in there to wear out. So a well-maintained one of these, usually no trouble. Now, what do they cost to buy?
Mate, that's a very good question. Look, basically, because all Japanese performance cars of the 2000s and even 1990s are going through the roof, not to mention that the used car market at the moment is hugely inflated, the price of these currently, they kick off at around about $40,000 and they top out at over $100,000. Now remember, these when brand new, they cost around about 75,000 Aussie dollars, but original, mint condition and low kilometre examples are asking far more than that these days. But here's a question for you guys. Do you think that the prices of these are going to continue to rise, or is the market topped out? Let us know in the comments. But be extremely careful of modified examples of these. If they are modified, are the actual modifications done correctly? Are they using quality components? If there's shit and dodgy modifications, do not buy that S2000. But what do they cost to own and operate? Honda claim a fuel consumption figure of around about 10 litres per 100 Ks, which is achievable as long as you never drive the car. But let's be honest here, if you're buying an S2000, you probably don't care about fuel consumption figures. Also, these things have a huge aftermarket scene and the owners groups are superb. Any information that you need, go to the owners groups, they're excellent. But should you buy one? Look, as I just said, obviously you shouldn't buy an abused or a badly modified example, but short of that, there are very few reasons that you shouldn't buy an S2000.
In terms of topless performance cars, the S2000 continues to nail the brief. Immense driver engagement, superb dynamics, an immensely tunable and responsive platform, Honda's exceptional build quality and reliability, and values that still continue to rise. So not only is an S2000 one of the all-time great performance cars, it could very well end up being an investment.
We actually argue that this is a far more intelligent choice of performance car over a whole bunch of other more exotic alternatives. But again, just please be careful of dodgy ones. Make sure you have a full pre-purchase inspection carried out. Make sure it has a faultless history. And if it ticks all of those boxes, yes, you should buy one. And if you can't buy one, find a way to drive one, because that is a very special car. We're talking 20, oh, what, my brain, here we go. This is generally due to the lower, what is it? Lower heater housing seam. Lower heater housing seam. Right, here we go. This is generally due to the lower, most commonly due to a lower heater housing seam which needs resealing. Lower heater housing seam. Lower heater housing seam. Compared to the other topless cars that we, here we go, good yet? Okay, a question for you. For what these cost, do you buy one of these, or do you buy like a massively modified MX-5 or some other performance car? Let us know in the comments. See you guys next week.